Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's Last Week in America. I am your host, Bob Snyder. I am an intern at the American Center in Moscow. Welcome to the page. I hope everybody's having a great day. As you know, I love to interact and with you guys and chat with you guys throughout these topics. So yeah, feel free to throw any comments and such in the chat box. And yeah, let's kind of get going a little bit. First, before we get really started with anything, I just want to let you guys know to check out the American Center Moscow page. They have a ton of really cool kind of content and information. I know right after this, they're doing I think they're doing a presentation kind of discussion about things to do in the summer in Russia. In America. What like Americans do during the summer when a lot of students are out of school and a lot of people are on break. And honestly, the Americans don't have, our holidays are a little different. So we changed that up a little bit with like people who work, their holidays are different. I know in Europe it's common to have a big holiday in August, and here that's not really the case. So definitely check that out. Like, comment, subscribe, check out the page. Ton of cool information. I think they are still doing the kids space camp. So if you guys have any children or siblings or friends that are younger that would be interested in that, definitely go check that out. But yeah, so hello, Timothy. Hope you're doing well today. As you can see, I am not actually in my normal streaming location. And if you've been following me these past few weeks, I've kind of been hopping around the country a bit. So actually, I am in Philadelphia at my significant other's house right now, just hanging out. So we're actually heading down to North Carolina right after this stream. So yeah, definitely, it's definitely interesting. Hello, Katerina. How are you today? Good to see some familiar faces here. So yeah, so if we go to the first slide, we got this is kind of where I like to do my about me for any new viewers and such. So I mean, if you're new, awesome to have you. So this picture is actually of it's the city of Philadelphia. That's where I am right now. I'm actually in the suburbs, about 15-20 minutes outside by train, so not too far. But yeah, that's Philadelphia, and that big river in the middle of it is called the Schuylkill. But I believe it's a Dutch word. I believe it is. Don't quote me on that, but I believe it's a Dutch word because the Dutch were actually the first people to kind of colonize this area of the country, and then the English came in. So we have Katerina. What about you? I'm good. I'm doing really well today. I got a good night's sleep. Currently 11 o'clock in the morning, so already finished my coffee and breakfast, ready to go for the day. But yeah, so Griffith Orange asks, hey, how's the weather in Philly? Philly right now is pretty nice. I mean, I don't know if you can see, it's a little sunny out. I mean, obviously, I assume that's going to totally mess with my camera lighting, but yeah. But it's pretty nice out. So yesterday, we're actually going to go cover this. The weather was really crazy yesterday and the past 2 days, really, in the area and just on the East Coast. But all the storms have passed, and it looks like it's beautiful out. I haven't been outside yet, but yeah. So yeah, so this is the city of Philly. It's a very large city, and to kind of get a conception of how densely populated the East Coast is, it's probably about like a 3-hour drive to New York City. So probably a little bit closer with traffic, probably closer to 4. But from downtown Philadelphia to downtown New York, it's only that far, and it's all suburbs in between essentially. So that kind of gives you a little preview into how densely populated the East Coast actually is. So yeah, yeah, we're gonna go to the next slide here, and we actually have a nice, pretty beach view, and this is actually where I'm driving today. So after this stream, I gotta hop in my car and just zoop down the East Coast and get here, and that'll be fun. It'll only take about 6 hours, and this is a small. It's an island chain off North Carolina called the Outer Banks. It's a really popular vacation spot for people from the Northeast, people from Virginia and DC area. Really popular. So, and I'm not only showing this because of that I'm going there. Don't worry. It has some relation to the events of last week. So we'll get into that now. But yeah, guys, so please, if you have any comments on any of the slides or anything, don't hesitate to throw some things into the chat box. And yeah, really looking forward to chatting with you guys today. So if we go to our first slide, so last week we had a tropical storm. So it looks like it's spelled Isaias, but it's actually Isaias. I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. I looked it up like 10 times right before this to make sure I'm pronouncing it correctly, but yeah, probably not. No, I mean, probably not. But yeah, Grapefruit Orange asks, aren't there some wild horses that live on the Outer Banks? Yeah, in the north of the Outer Banks, north of this town called Corolla. North of that, all the way up north on the peninsula, you have wild horses that hang out and roam the beaches. It's really beautiful. So you can go actually and hop in your car, and if you have the right kind of car, you could drive onto the beaches and go see the wild horses. Obviously, you can't get near them, can't touch them. They're all protected by the state. But yeah, it's a really beautiful sight. My mom and my sister absolutely love horses, so they always make it a thing to go. I am kind of scared of horses, to be honest, so I try not to. I don't find that the most enjoyable trip, but yeah, it's definitely something. So good question. Yeah, no, yeah, that's yeah. I'm surprised you knew that. That's awesome. So this past week, so on Monday, Tropical Storm Isaias made landfall in North Carolina and South Carolina. And on the right, you can actually see a picture. I think these things are the pictures from the NASA are so cool with the huge swirling winds. But you can actually see where that's hitting. So and they did a pretty good job of showing the state lines in there. And actually, that little island, I guess, protrusion out on the coast, that's the Outer Banks. So the tropical storm hit then. It originally was a hurricane, but it got downgraded to a tropical storm. Then it got upgraded to a hurricane, and then downgraded to a tropical storm again. But so it was yeah, it was really high winds, and then I woke up on yesterday morning, like very early, because my phone was going off, and apparently there was a bunch of tornadoes in the area. So more than 20 tornadoes have been reported since Monday, spanning from North Carolina to New Jersey. So you can see that it really affected the whole East Coast. So the winds exceeded 60 miles per hour when they made landfall in North Carolina. And then, so right now, actually, I mean, I pulled this together. I wrote this yesterday, but actually, yesterday, the Isaias was traveling into the Northeast, and I know there are tons of falling trees and a lot of power outages across the country. And I actually know some people, actually not even some, a good amount of people today are still out of power. So yeah, it's so people are asking, so what are the origins of this name? What are the origins of this name? So I don't know, but I mean, do you mean like the ethnic origins of Isaias? I don't know. It's not a super common name. I've heard it a few times. A few people named it. Yeah, I don't really know the actual origin. So why did they? Dina Peltel, Dina, I hope you're doing well today. She asked why did they call it Isaias? So in the United States, all the tropical storms and hurricanes, if they hit Category 3, which is a minimum threshold of wind speed, they get named. So there's like a huge list of names for that they just kind of go through, and it's alphabetical. So I know last year, we're going to go and show it, but no, not even last year, but 2017, they were an H. So this year they're an I. So they kind of just go down a list of alphabetical names. I have no idea how they get these names. I think it's really interesting. But yeah, I definitely want to look into it more. So I know that something crazy is that if the hurricane is strong enough and does enough damage, they actually retire the name so that no other hurricane can be named that, which is kind of crazy because that's like retiring a professional player's jersey. I was reading, I was like, oh my gosh, that's insane. So yeah, so there's a hurricane, a tropical storm Hall of Fame in the United States, I guess. But So Katerina Smilshkina asks, "Isn't it usual for you to have hurricanes?" Yeah, it's very common, and I'm actually going to get into that in a little bit here. Hello, Grigory Dunyav. I hope you're doing well today. So if we could get the next slide, I got a little video for you guys to see. Most of the footage is from Florida, so you just kind of see the high wind speeds, and actually it kind of glanced off and hit up north, and it was picking up speed when the video was reporting on it. So let's watch that.
Evening as we come on the air in the West tonight, and we do have breaking news off the top as this country fights the coronavirus. A tropical storm has just been upgraded to a hurricane just as it prepares to slam into the east tonight. From the Carolinas up through New York and Boston, and in New York City, they are expecting winds, the gusts up to 60, even 70 miles per hour. And you're about to hear from the doctors worried tonight with their hospitals already full with COVID patients. Warnings posted up and down the coast tonight. Dangerous winds, blinding rain, and a storm surge of up to 5 feet expected in some areas. Wind, heavy rain already near Myrtle Beach tonight. Time-lapse video actually showing outer bands of the system rolling through Jacksonville, Florida today. The Northeast, as I mentioned, now bracing for the storm 2 and the potential for hurricane-force winds set to strike from Philadelphia to New York. So we have the latest track for you tonight, and we begin with ABC's Eva Pilgrim in Myrtle Beach, leading us off.
Tonight, outer bands of Isaias closing in on the Carolinas and threatening the entire East Coast with powerful winds and life-threatening storm surge.
It's moving quickly enough that it won't really have a chance to weaken.
In New York City, they're putting up mile-long barriers in low-lying areas to keep the water out. Coronavirus cases and deaths on the rise in several of the states in Isaias' path. Florida avoiding a direct hit, but forced to close some outdoor testing sites because of Isaias' wind. The Carolinas might not be as lucky.
Shelters will screen people for coronavirus symptoms. Shelters will have PPE and will honor social distancing.
Been here 35 years. We've never seen a situation like this where the hospital has been under this much stress.
Weeks ago, Tidelands Medical Center, just outside Myrtle Beach, had to call the National Guard to help handle all their COVID cases. Tonight, preparing to face a surge in patients.
The hospital is absolutely full with COVID. The ICU is. We're over capacity. The ER is. And now with a storm coming, it's just something else to deal with.
Isaias killed at least 3 in the Caribbean, knocking out power to nearly 500,000 on Puerto Rico. It could stay at or near tropical storm strength all the way to New England.
And we are starting to see those outer bands. This storm surge is expected to be 3 to 5 feet, and this storm will hit at just about the same time as high tide. It's also a full moon tonight, so that means a higher than normal tide and the potential for significant flash flooding. The other major concern here, tornadoes. This area is under a tornado watch until 2 a.m. David?
Yes, so take this very seriously. Eva Pilgrim, our thanks to you tonight. Again, the Carolinas straight up into New York City and Boston. So let's get right to senior meteorologist Rob Marciano with the timing and the track of this. He's in Carolina Beach, North Carolina tonight. Hey, Rob.
Hi, David. It's not a Cat 3 or 4, but the track of this is just remarkable. Everyone on the East Coast is going to be impacted. We're under a hurricane warning right now for this beach, and look at this. All these warnings and watches right up through New England, and that pretty much mimics the track, which takes it in through North Carolina and then up 95 over New York City tomorrow. As Eva mentioned, we do have a tornado watch out tonight ahead of this storm. The center is about 100 miles to our south, and it will be making landfall in the next few hours, potentially as a hurricane. It's going to have damaging winds, a damaging storm surge, and winds 60, 80 miles an hour between Myrtle Beach and Wilmington, Raleigh, Richmond tomorrow morning, then D.C. and Philly tomorrow afternoon. We could have tornadoes rolling up through this area as well. Philly, New York tomorrow afternoon, and in through New England tomorrow night. The next 30 hours, David, will be intense.
And as you said, it doesn't matter the category of this storm. It's going to be dangerous. Rob, our thanks to you as well. We're thinking of all the families in the storm zone.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube.
So guys, I hope you enjoyed that little video. Yeah, it kind of showed the hurricane, and then the one thing that it kind of really heavily focused on was the effect that it would have on COVID and the hospitals. I think a growing concern was that it would do not the physical damage was the concern for the hospitals and such, and the newly erect buildings to take care of COVID. So that was kind of a major concern for it. Honestly, it was a little downplay. it didn't live up. It was, I guess, better than they expected, and it didn't really result in much death or damage or anything. But it was a pretty big one, and we saw it here. So yeah, so we have some questions about the video. So Georgi asks, is ABC News pro-Republican or pro-Democrat? So it's not as polarizing as CNN or Fox, which is CNN is the pro-Democrat network and Fox is the pro-Republican, or they're liberal and conservative news sources, and those are the biggest differences. ABC will fall more in the moderate, but typically outside of Fox and OANN, which is the One America News Network, which is kind of a new one. It's kind of become popular now. They kind of fall a little bit to the left, or they're moderate. So yeah, that was a good question though, but I mean that was a relatively objective news story. I would say it was just kind of trying to show that the potential impact of the storm on COVID and such. So, Grapefruit Orange asks, is it common for Americans who live in areas that are often hit by hurricanes to have some sort of hurricane supplies ready, like repackaged meals? Yeah, I would assume so. I know that their windows, they have, they put little like metal grates on their windows, and their storm windows is what they're called, is so that their like wood, tree branches, debris doesn't go and break the glass on their windows. So they're called storm windows, and they'll board their houses up. So that kind of, I know that people typically have that prepared, and I would assume that they have some food and a lot of backup generators, because power goes out pretty frequently during storms like this with the high winds. It blows our power lines because we're all not all. I mean, in cities, it's you see a lot of the underground power lines, but a lot of the time where there's, I guess, above ground power lines that go and get taken down. So you have the Department of Works kind of coming out and force the next day to just refix them. And yeah, so David said, such a funny name. So I looked it up during the video. It is Isaias, and it is Latin. I think it's like Latin for God's glory, something to do. It's a biblical, religious, Latin name. So yeah, which is interesting. That's news to me. I thought it was interesting. Anywho, yeah, let's kind of move on, and let's go to the next slide. We got some pictures of the storm. So actually, my girlfriend's friend made this took this picture of the mail truck being crushed. The mail guy was not in the truck, and no one was hurt, but I thought that kind of shows, and this was actually in New Jersey in the Northeast, so that kind of shows that the extent of the winds and how the effect of it actually kind of travels up the coast and affects all of the eastern seaboard, really. And then on the right we have just you can see the waves, and this is in Florida, so this is a little south of it, but you still get the outskirts of the tropical storm come and hit the areas that it doesn't directly make landfall. So, because it's a giant cyclone of wind and water and just dramatically changing air pressure. So it goes and affects large geographic regions. And I know typically the most devastating impact is actually in the Caribbean and Florida. So luckily, being in New Jersey, we've only really had to deal with one major storm in the past 20 years or so. So anyway, yeah, so let's go to the next slide and let's talk about some hurricanes. So hurricane season, it's what it's called when it's like the period from, I believe, May till September. It's called hurricane season, and that's when all the hurricanes they form and go and hit, and they can actually predict where they hit based on what season they are made in, because I guess the warmth and the location of the Earth and the moon changes all of that, because the moon controls the tides and such. So in the U.S., on average, there are 12 hurricanes and tropical storms hit the Atlantic coastline each year. So the difference between a hurricane and tropical storm is a hurricane exceeds 70 miles an hour. Winds. Their winds exceed 70 miles an hour, and this has to be for 1 minute straight. Whereas a tropical storm, they have to only exceed 39 miles an hour for a minute straight. So you can see that hurricanes are almost twice as more powerful to even be classified as a hurricane. So the weakest hurricane is 2 times as powerful as the weakest tropical storm. So and then the most notable hurricanes that hit the U.S. in recent years were Katrina. I don't know if you guys heard about that. That was a pretty huge natural disaster that occurred about 16 years ago now. Wow, yeah, under the Bush administration, and that was one of the big things that he was criticized for, but his response to Katrina and such. And then we have Hurricane Harvey, which actually hit in 2017, and that kind of devastated a lot of Texas. So Grigori asks, can I ask where you are currently, which state and which city? Currently, I am in a small town right outside of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and that is on the East Coast, about 3 to 4 hours driving south of New York City. So if that kind of, it's the major city in between New York and Washington, D.C. So it's New York, Philadelphia, and then there's a smaller one called Baltimore, and then D.C. But Philadelphia has over 1.5 million people, and it's a pretty major city. It was actually the first capital of the United States, and there's a lot of history here with founding fathers. But yeah, good question. So so let's go to the next slide, and we can see this is actually a map of all kind of tracking and to show all of the hurricanes and where they originate. They originate in this in the mid-Atlantic, right above the mid-Atlantic shelf, and go and develop across the ocean, in the middle of the ocean, and off the coast of South America, and then they actually go and hit the coastline and blow back north. So you get the most intense, obviously, you can see in the Caribbean, whereas you can't even see some of the islands. So I believe this is the hurricanes tracked over the past 20 years. So this kind of shows just how prevalent they actually are. But let's go to the next slide, and we can talk a little bit about Hurricane Katrina. So this is the path of Hurricane Katrina in the bottom right. It kind of it made original landfall in Bermuda and then came down to Florida, but really got pulled over into the Gulf of Mexico. That's what that body of water is called, and blew up really hard and gained a lot of strength going into Louisiana, Mississippi. So Hurricane Katrina, it landed in August of 2005 in New Orleans, so actually 15 years ago to now. So it was a Category 5 hurricane with 175-mile-an-hour winds. Category 5 is the highest category of hurricane. So that is 280-kilometer-per-hour winds. So I hope that I can never do the conversions in my head. And I obviously, if you don't live in the U.S., people don't do miles an hour. I think it's only like 3 countries in the world that do it. But after it made landfall and during its path, it resulted in 1,836 deaths and over $125 billion in damages. So this is in 2005. So 125 billion adjusted to now is $161 billion in damages. So it was actually devastating to New Orleans. So the New Orleans is a big city in Louisiana, right at the mouth of the Mississippi River, which is the major river in the United States. So they have levees, which are these giant protective, like sand and rock and earth mounds that protect, and a lot of them are seawalls. They protect the tides from coming over because New Orleans, since it's at the bottom of this river, it actually sits below sea level. So they have to create these levees, and they go and they actually reclaim a lot of the land. I know it's really popular in the Netherlands and the lowland regions. They do this as well. So they reclaim a lot of land. So levees failed because they weren't high enough, and there's a lot of debate afterwards about the structural integrity and such on that. And 80% of the city flooded, which is huge because it's a massive city and one of the big economic powerhouses in that area for cities. So and it was a tragedy. So let's go to the next slide and we can see some pictures. And this is actually, I don't know which interstate this is, but this is the interstate in so these pictures are from the aftermath of Hurricane Katrina. And so we have the left, we have the picture of just the flooding that's flooded the highways essentially, and just everything you can see there. And then on the right, we see there was a lot of a huge concerted effort by the National Guard and the U.S. military to go, and they took a lot of helicopters to go and evacuate people because people were just standing on the roofs, nowhere to go, and people were trying to use doors as boats and try to get around the city. So it was a travesty, and so many people lost their homes. And Louisiana is not known for economic prosperity in the first place, so a lot of these people lost everything they had and didn't have savings funds to cover that. So that was it was a big tragedy, and there's a ton of federal relief that went to it. But I don't know how much actually made it to the people and how much they were able to stabilize. But I know the Superdome, which is where the New Orleans Saints play, it's the football team in the city, a professional football team, and they went and actually housed people in the stadium because they had to. So Grapefruit Orange says, you said that President Bush was criticized for his response to Hurricane Katrina. Yeah, why? What was his response? So it was kind of more of he was criticized for a lack of a quick response. So that was what's up? When did you turn? But no, sorry. He was just kind of criticized for his lack of response. So, and that was from one side. Obviously, he was supported by the other side because it's politics in the U.S. So, Grigori asks, "Thanks. Did you try to be a journalist?" I have not. I am only 24, so maybe one day I'll go into that. I'm still. I'm actually getting my master's right now in international studies. With a focus on Russia and Eastern Europe. So maybe one day I'll go and try to do some journalism or something like that along the lines of. I mean, I don't really know. I don't know yet. I'm not trained to be a weatherman. They're called meteorologists technically. That's their professional name. But I'm not trained to be that. Yeah. And I mean, the guys with umbrellas who have giant mortality rates in films about weather. No. Yeah, no. I did not. And I don't think the films are that accurate. I don't think a lot of weathermen die every year due to strong weather conditions. But I know there's a lot of funny weathermen bloopers and spoofs and stuff you see on the internet, though, on YouTube. But anyway, yeah. So let's go to the next slide, and we have this is actually an image of Hurricane Katrina in Mississippi. So this doesn't show the flooding, but this actually shows the devastating winds and how they just tore things up from the ground because they're so fast and how powerful it was. And it's devastating. There's a lot of trailer parks. They're at risk. Hurricanes create tornadoes that go through the area. So it's a severe weather disaster. But yeah, so let's go to the next slide. And this is kind of my last image for Hurricane Katrina. And this is in Louisiana. It's just kind of another image of it just looks like little islands or little houseboats, but it's not. These are streets and people live there, and it was a huge tragedy for the area. But yeah, so let's so that's about it for Hurricane Katrina. It's kind of the really big one. It's the biggest in a very long time, and other than what we're going to get into, and it kind of is one of the things that growing up during that time kind of falls on the national consciousness of Americans. So let's go to the next slide, and we have Hurricane Harvey, which was one that hit Texas. So in 2017, Hurricane Harvey landed in Texas and Louisiana. So there are 107 direct and indirect. I believe it was 39 and 68. Yeah, so 68 direct deaths, 39 indirect deaths. So it hit with 130-mile-an-hour winds, which is 215 kilometers per hour, which is very fast. So you got to think the minimum to be a hurricane is 75-mile-an-hour winds. So it's a little less than double that. But yeah, and it caused $125 billion in damage. So it went and hit Texas, and I know there was a huge response around the United States, and you actually saw people like fire companies from the Northeast and in New Jersey. I lived in New Jersey at the time, would go pack up and just go to Harvey, and they would just drive to Texas to respond. So it was a big national response for the whole area of people like towing companies and construction companies and firefighters going and hopping in their cars and getting down to Texas to help out. So Yeah, so let's go to the next slide here, and we can see the path of Harvey. So this one developed where most storms develop in the mid-Atlantic here, flew up through there, and picked up speed after it went over the Yucatan Peninsula. That's that little jut in Mexico. And then picked up speed and crashed right into Texas, bounced off, and then headed back up into Ohio. But I know we got rains and such actually in New Jersey, so it was a big hurricane. And then this obviously did a ton of damage in Texas and such. And yeah, let's go to the next slide, and we can see. I think these images are super cool. So this is taken from the ISS, the International Space Station, and this is Harvey as it's in the Gulf Coast when it's kind of really fully forming, and you could see the cyclone and the swirling in it, and it just winds and rains and crowd. And I know the center of it's called the eye of the hurricane. So yeah, I mean, this as you can see, like hurricanes and such, this is they're very common in the United States. They hit every year, and so let's talk about our last hurricane before getting into a little bit of a discussion, and that is Hurricane Sandy. This is not nearly as powerful as the other two, but this one is notable because it landed much farther north than other hurricanes do, and to places that just aren't prepared to get not to get hurricaned, but to get hit by a hurricane. So it was a Category 3 hurricane that landed in October of 2012, and it was particularly devastating to New Jersey and New York, and it actually so I brought this one up because personally living in New Jersey at the time, this was such a big deal. And Sandy is still a big deal, and you still see there's still homes that are just destroyed from Sandy and just empty lots down by the beach. And I remember going and traveling down to the shore because I have a lot of family down there. The day or two after it hit, I mean, it felled trees all over my little town that I lived in northern New Jersey. But going down and seeing just like 2 or 3 feet of sand on all the streets that were close to the beach, because we don't have the dunes and the infrastructure to protect against these things, because it's once in a lifetime kind of storm is how people would really describe it. But we're very devastating to that. And I remember just seeing all the destroyed homes, and it was really tragic, and made me obviously I was very upset because I grew up going down to the shore and seeing my family and such. So yeah, this is kind of want to bring that up. So if we go to the next slide, we can see this is a picture. This is Manalapan, New Jersey. So this is one of the beach towns. Yeah, very, very funny, Georgi. That's why it is Sandy, isn't it? Yeah, no, what an apt name for the hurricane. Yes. Yes, good job putting 2 and 2 together. But yep. So this is a picture of Manalapan, New Jersey, which is a small little beach town on the Jersey Shore. And as you can see, the water goes and went up. And this is a very, very wealthy area, and these are multi-million-dollar homes. But they got flooded out, and I know that looting became a thing where the Coast Guard had to patrol because people would from inland or just people would hop on little boats and go and break into these homes and steal from them while nobody could get to them while they were unprotected. So there's so much value in them because it's a very wealthy area. But yeah, and then if we go to the next slide, we can see this is actually the Seaside Heights Boardwalk, and so Sandy absolutely destroyed the boardwalk, and that all had to be rebuilt. And kind of it's living down there, and I lived at the Jersey Shore on the coastline in a town called Manasquan, next to it's a big tourist town, and it's kind of, we look at time in the past 20 years as more of like pre-Sandy and post-Sandy, because so much was taken down. And I remember like beforehand there would be these small cute little houses that are like traditional little beach shacks, but they all kind of got taken down, and now there's a lot of new money coming in and building up a lot nicer places. So it's kind of doing that. And then the boardwalk had to get just completely redone because it was completely wiped out. As you can see, the roller coasters and the surf Yeah, so that's kind of Hurricane Sandy. Just wanted to go through that and show you guys that. But yeah, we're going to go to our first discussion. I only have 2 topics today, by the way, so I think we're going to end a few minutes early. So the questions are, yeah, and here I got some questions for you guys. Please feel free to answer them. And I'll go and do my best. So the first question is, would you move to an area that is prone to hurricanes and tropical storms? That's just like Hurricane, not Hurricane Alley. That's called Tornado Alley. That's in the middle of the U.S. It's a whole entire another thing that maybe we'll talk about one day. But where the hurricanes all hit on the eastern seaboard, would you move to one of those areas? And I guess what would be the benefits and the drawbacks of having to live in those areas? So, and then I always have a question about you guys, and because I'm curious, mostly just this is my own curiosity. So does Russia have any annual natural disaster occurrence? So like we have annual hurricanes and tornadoes in the United States, and then on the West Coast, there's a lot of wildfires every year, some landslides here and there, occasionally earthquakes. Like are any of these common in Russia, whether or not it be like extreme snowstorms and such? And yeah, so we have a question from Grapefruit Orange. How were people evacuated? So people would go in and use helicopters. So a lot of police stations, and especially at the larger level, like county police and state police, mostly state police, go and they have helicopters, and they'll go and they'll helicopter down and pick people up. So yeah, so Dina Pelt says, yeah, it is possible to predict. She asks, is it possible to predict them and get prepared? Yeah, they know there's a huge, NASA works with the weather forecasting, and there's a huge weather forecasting apparatus in the United States that's actually international. And I know Brazil actually has a big one now too, because they got hit by a hurricane pretty recently, and they started one. And they forecasted and track all the hurricanes that are even forming over by the coast of Western Africa. So Dunayev says we have a disaster every year. We don't have warm water for 2 weeks in the summer. Why would that be? What is that from? Interesting. And then I'm not sure if it's a natural disaster, but where I live, the snow doesn't get clear away and piles up so high. Yeah, I don't know if I would consider that a natural disaster. I think you just live in a snowy area. I went to school in upstate New York, and I remember it would snow in like November, and then we wouldn't see the ground until late April, early May. And it would just be all of April was typically muddy before it got hot enough to dry out. So I wouldn't call that a natural disaster, but definitely a lot of. So I think one of the best. So personally, I would. It depends, obviously, on work and where. I'm answering the question: would I move to an area that is prone to hurricanes and tropical storms? I would. So the good thing about these areas is typically they're by the coastline and they're sunny and beautiful and vacation spots. So there's and the hurricanes, you really only get a bad one once every few years, and you can take the proper precautions to make sure you're fine. But I know like boats, it'd be tough if you want to have boats and stuff that you got to take them out of the water and ship them inland. So it could be a pretty big spend. Dina says there's wildfires in Siberian forest every year. Yeah, I actually do remember that. I do remember reading about that. And I wonder if that's linked to climate in a way with warming. It kind of dries out areas and allows to wildfires. Oh, Gloria says pipes are under testing and under repair. Oh, so it's the actual infrastructure of the hot water system where you live. Okay, so. Oh. I guess we're experiencing some technical difficulties. It seems like it might be on the user side. Oh, we're back. Okay, cool. Yeah, so I only have a few slides to go through here. Yeah, no, I'm alive. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your concern, guys. I appreciate that. There's no hurricane anymore, so perfect. Cool. Glad. So we're doing President Trump versus TikTok. And if we go to the next slide, I can kind of breeze through it and repeat it. It was President Trump said that he wanted TikTok to be he would ban the use of TikTok by September 15th. This was cited because of his view of, and some government views of Chinese, the fact that it's owned by Chinese government means that U.S. user data was being stored outside the country, and that he was used as a pretext of a security threat. So he claimed it was invasive to user privacy, and he said that the solution is that an American company must purchase it if we're going to keep it online. So let's go to the next slide, and we have an image of the head of Microsoft thinking about TikTok. So Microsoft has moved to acquire TikTok, and they made in their press statement, among other measures, Microsoft would ensure that all private data of TikTok's American users is transferred to and remains in the United States. To the extent that any such data is currently stored or backed up outside the United States, Microsoft would ensure that this data is deleted from servers outside the country after it is transferred. So that's their way of solving it, and that's in their press statement, and that's kind of addressing the president and the federal government's concerns over the application. So that's kind of what they're doing, and obviously everything is pending review, so they have to go and review all the financials, all the actual security infrastructure and the application itself and the company itself before moving to acquire. But that's kind of what's going on with that, and that's a pretty big, that's a social media giant. TikTok is kind of rose to the top, especially among the generation younger than me. So I'm 24 now, so people in high school, so 14 and up, until like 21, 22 are really interested in TikTok. And I know obviously people my age that are interested in it too. But so let's go to the discussion about that. So why do you think Microsoft would want to purchase TikTok and enter the world of social media? So they don't own any large social media company right now. I mean Skype, but that's a video streaming company. But they don't own any of the large social media. So why would they want to go and purchase this is kind of my question. And then this is more of a personal question of, do you think people will stop using applications if they fear that their personal information is at risk? So obviously this is a continuing concern with the age of media, of the internet, and just publishing of all your personal information and data and putting it on there to even subscribe to these things. So that's kind of my question. Do you think people will stop using the application if they fear that their personal information is at risk? King the Roar says they have Xbox. Yeah, they do have Xbox. But I wouldn't call that a social media app. That's more of a gaming system. And obviously I'm on Xbox. I don't really play anymore, but I used to play Xbox and obviously communicate with my friends, but so it's not like social media. So it also says it correlates with younger audience, with a younger audience market. I think that's possible, is trying to make Microsoft more and more relevant to younger consumers, whereas there's always been a shift, and we can actually even see it in our phones in the United States. Is the iPhone is king here. Not everybody, obviously, but the primary phone that people use is an iPhone here. So I think that's it. I think also just getting into the world of social media will generate so much revenue for Microsoft, and it's kind of a very strategic play to bridge that gap of just creating. They have been with creating they just used to be software. Now it's a lot of hardware that they actually create, and then the gaming. They're huge in the gaming industry as one of the big platforms, and I think this is kind of just another step to kind of go and push more into the online realm of social media. So I'm going to go to the last slide, and this one's questions. We're going to wrap up here in a few minutes, guys. I just want to let you know I actually have to run. I got to go hop in a car and drive down to North Carolina. I really liked all your guys' comments today and questions today. It was interesting. Definitely always a pleasure talking to you guys. So these are just any common questions for the next 2 or 3 minutes that you guys have for me. I'd be happy to answer. Before you guys leave, make sure to check out the American Center Moscow page, like, comment, subscribe. Ton of cool content there, so definitely check that out. And I will be back next week. We are changing the time, I believe, to an hour earlier, so it should be 5 to 6. Yeah, so definitely join me next week. I'll go and try to find some good articles. If you have any suggestions for anything you wanted to hear about or learn about, go and throw that in the comments. I check them before every video, before even kind of doing my research and such. So yeah, well, thank you, Grapefruit Orange. I appreciate it. Hopefully I will have a great journey too. I mean, it's going to be 6 hours in a car, so it's not that fun. You're welcome, Tatiana. Always a pleasure. I love seeing familiar faces in the chat, and it's really interesting. So, well, guys, there's no questions. I just want to say thank you again. Check out the page, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. All right, stay safe out there in the world of COVID, and yeah, have a great week.